The team had split. Hunter and Paul in charge of interviews with Dimitri and Albertus, while she, Naz and Sabira, being experienced at dealing with domestic crime and victims of sexual offences, were speaking with Hannah, Michaela and the other girls rescued from the brothel. So far, though, not an ill word had been voiced against the two men, never mind written down in a statement. Albertus is making no comment, but Dimitri is at least talking, Paul responded. But so far, he's coming up with a good defence. What's he saying? The team were continuing to refer to their man as Dimitri, even though his fingerprints and DNA had now positively identified him as a male of Russian origin called Viktor Egorov. As well as the names Dmitry Ivanov and Leo Markin, Egorov had at least 9 other aliases known to police forces across Europe. He had entered the UK illegally, using one of his pseudonyms, and disappeared into the murky criminal underworld, operating the black economy and vice trade in the back streets of London. Never having been arrested in the UK until now, he had remained unknown to police in England. But a trawl through Interpol records had shown him to be a well-known player in a number of foreign OCNs, or organised crime networks. He knows his fingerprints and DNA will be found at both brothels, so he's saying that he has frequented both locations regularly as a client. He claims to be allowed to live there in return for running errands for some acquaintances. Paul emphasised the word. He can't or won't name these people or say anything further about them other than to assert he is frightened of them as they sometimes turn up armed with firearms and so he doesn't ask questions. He accepts that the documents found in his possession were false, but reiterates that he was given them to use by the main guy and being an illegal immigrant, he was scared that he would be kicked out onto the streets if he refused to do what was instructed. So basically he's saying that he was acting under duress, and that there are other people out there who are pulling his strings and masterminding the whole operation, rather than it being him. That's pretty smart, especially if we can't get any of the girls to say otherwise. Quite, Paul agreed. We're even going to struggle to get him charged with the knife and drugs offences. What do you mean? She thought they at least had enough evidence to hold him in custody for those. Betts contacted the elderly mayor passerby who gave the info on the knife. He confirms Dimitri's account, in that he says there was another girl who did actually have the knife first, before Dimitri got possession of it. She walked away when he drove off. In the eyes of the CPS, he has a credible lawful excuse for having it. Plus, it was found in his car. It wasn't even on his person. As for the GHB, SOCO hasn't found any fingerprints on the vials and won't be able to get fingerprints off the paper bag, so we'll never be able to prove they belong to him. Especially if we don't know the other girl, and Michaela is staying silent and not denying they're hers. Damn it! So apart from being in this country as an illegal immigrant and a rather weak possession of false IDs, we have nothing to conclusively prove he was running the brothels or had anything to do with the baby's death. He'll probably be given a slap on the wrist and deported back to Russia in due course if that's the case. Yep, and then he'll be released and come straight back using a different name. Unless we can persuade one of the girls to testify. Charlie could feel her frustration growing as she ended the call and shoved her phone back in her pocket. Hannah's words came forcefully to mind. None of the reassurances they'd offered had been enough to assuage their fears. Each girl still believed she and her family were in danger, but at the same time, how could they stay silent and let their captor get away scot-free? One of them could even be the mother of the dead baby, yet still none were willing to speak out. The thought prompted her to pick up the phone again. They couldn't afford to wait a minute longer. The lab technician spoke clinically and without emotion. The DNA sample provided by each of the girls found at the Lewisham brothel had finally been compared against the DNA from the blood on the dead baby's head, and none of the samples matched. Charlie heard the words, struggling to remain unaffected as the full implication of the results sunk in. So our baby's mother is still missing. Charlie mumbled out loud down the phone to the unknown staff member. We know she gave birth at the brothel in Streatham, but she never arrived at Lewisham. She let her arm drop, leaving the line still open, and voiced the question that was now her number one priority. So where the hell did she go? Viktor Egorov stared at DC Charlie Stafford as she entered the interview room, slipping in next to Detective Inspector Hunter.